Upcycle Squad. Got a quick banger for you today. Welt pockets. They look something like this or something like this. This is going to be the easy way to sew welt pockets and not following like what a tailor would do. But I'm going to show you how to pattern and sew a welt pocket and a double welt pocket. We're going to start off with the single welt pocket. So it'll look something like that or that. And the pattern piece is super simple. It is just a big rectangle. I put the measurements on for my exact pattern piece if you want to just copy it. So it's 25 inches or 63.5 centimeters by 9 inches or 23 centimeters. And then my welt is 1 inch by 6 3/4 inches. So for this method of the welt pocket, it is just one piece. And this is a relatively large welt pocket, so feel free to play around with the size. And how you're going to want to determine the width and the length of your pattern piece, starting with the width. So first I would decide how wide your welt is going to be, and that is also the size of your pocket opening. And then once you decide how large you want your welt to be, you just want to leave space on either side of that. I would say at least 3/4 of an inch. I have an inch on either side. So when we fold up, we have space to close the pocket bag. And then also you're going to want to have at least 3/4 of an inch, or I have an inch here of space above the welt so we can close up the top. And then for the length of your pattern piece, you're going to want it to be double how deep you want the pocket bag. So if you just fold in half, this is going to be roughly the length of your pocket bag. So you want it to be double the length of your pocket bag plus 2 of your welt measurements, because you're going to be folding up the fabric to make that welt. So the length is double the length of what you want your pocket bag to be plus 2 of the lengths of your welt. And then for the rectangle that is going to be your welt, we're going to be drawing that onto the cut out fabric piece. You can actually cut out this rectangle on your paper pattern piece. So when you cut your fabric, you have a guideline for tracing out the rectangle of the welt with chalk or a pen or pencil. I know that my welt is just an inch from either side and an inch from the top, so I didn't cut this out because I know I can easily plot it on my piece, but do what works best for you. So once your paper pattern piece is finalized, you're going to want to cut it out in your fabric. I did the same fabric as the piece I'm going to be sewing it on, but you could use a different fabric if you want your welt to be a different color. And for the first step, we're going to be drawing our welt onto the fabric. So I'm going to use chalk, and I'm drawing my welt on the wrong side because I'm going to be stitching right sides together. So now you can see I have my welt drawn in just like it is on my pattern piece. And again, if you want to cut out this rectangle to make it a little bit easier to trace, make sure to do so. Once you have your welt pocket piece cut out and marked, and then the piece that you want to sew the welt pocket on, we can get stitching. So it's really up to you where you want to place your welt. Just know where you put this box on your piece of fabric is where the welt pocket is going to start, and that's going to be the opening. And for this specific piece, I have the top seam of my welt pocket bag going into the yoke seam, and it is 1.5 inches from the center back. Once your welt pocket is placed where you would like to have it, feel free to pin it into place. I'm not going to, but now we can get to stitching. Bring it over to your sewing machine, and we are now going to stitch the outline of the welt, starting at the middle of the top or the bottom, doesn't really matter, but just following this line. So I just started in the middle of the welt there, and now I'm just following that line. Then once you get to a corner, lift up your foot and pivot, because we do want to get some pretty crisp corners here, and then continue on. And then once you make it back to where you started, make sure to do a little back stitch, lock it in place. And the reason we started in the middle here is because we want these corners to be really nice and clean. So if we were to start over here, the end product just does not look as good. Now that you have stitched your rectangle, we are going to be opening it up. So I drew out what you're going to want to cut. So you're basically just cutting a straight line right down the middle, and then it forms these little triangles on either side. And you want to cut pretty much right to the corner, but do not cut your stitch. And I usually don't even mark this, but I thought it would be a good visual for the video. I'll usually start my cut with a rotary blade, and then finish it off with some scissors. And then again, when you're cutting the triangles, you want to make sure to get close to that corner, but do not cut your stitch. This is roughly how you should be looking after you cut. And now bring this entire piece to your ironing board. So we're at the ironing board, still looking at the pocket bag, and here is our cutout. What I'm gonna do first is flip my pocket bag up and then iron this seam nice and open. Then flip it back. I'm gonna take this top edge, flip it open, do the same thing, iron that nice and flat and open. And then same thing for either side, just open that up, iron it nice, flat and open. And all that does is when we flip it through the hole we cut, it'll be much cleaner. So once you've ironed your pocket bag up, the top edge down, and then each side piece, we're gonna take the entire pocket bag piece and flip it through to the other side, going through this cutout we made. So just grabbing the entire pocket bag and flipping it through. Definitely can take some maneuvering. Thank you, birds, for the music. So now your pocket bag is on the underside and we have this clean rectangular cutout. I'm gonna do it one more time. So I reflipped it to the original position and all I'm doing is flipping the pocket bag through that hole, all of those edges, and it forms that nice rectangular cutout. So this is roughly how you should be looking. This is the underside now, and we're going to take our iron and iron along the edges of this rectangle to make it nice and clean and crisp. So you want to make sure that the rectangular seam is kind of rolled out as much as possible. And it's better to have the outside fabric kind of peeking towards the inside than it is to have the inside fabric peeking out to the outside. So I have a little bit of the outside fabric peeking into the inside, but then on the outside, you can only see the outside fabric. Once you are happy with how your rectangular cutout is pressed, I'm going to be top stitching the edge of the cutout, which you don't necessarily have to do. I just think it makes the construction a little bit more durable. So I just started on one end. I'm going to follow the edge and then finish back where I started. Now, once top stitched or not, we are going to form our welt. So bring it back to your ironing board. So back at the ironing board, looking at the underside. Now we are going to flip the pocket bag all the way up until we see this seam. And now we are going to press this upwards nice and flat all the way along. So we just flipped our pocket bag up from this position. Boom. And then pressed it nice and flat. Now we're going to bring our pocket bag back over, but we're going to leave a fold that just covers that rectangle. So I'm using the edge of the rectangle here to be the top of my fold. So kind of just maneuvering that with my fingers, and that will be our welt. Just for a quick run through again, I flipped all the way up, pressed this seam. Now I'm bringing the pocket bag back over, but leaving a fold to cover that rectangle, which will be our welt. And once I'm happy with how the welt is covering that rectangular cutout, give it a nice press. And boom, that is your welt. Would also recommend flipping over and just making sure you're happy with how the welt looks. And grab yourself a pin, and we are going to flip up one side and just pin this fold of the welt. And same thing for the other side. So just flipping up and pinning the fold of the welt so we can stitch it down. Now we're going to be stitching our welt in place. I usually like to just flip my piece up and then stitch this whole bottom and left and right edge in one foul swoop. So I'm going to start by flipping just the piece of my panel up to reach the pocket bag of the welt pocket only. So just flipping up to reach the welt pocket bag. And now I'm pretty much going to be stitching in the ditch. So stitching very close to this panel we flipped up, but not onto that panel. So starting here on one side of my welt, getting very close, but not stitching that panel. Now, once I've made it to the bottom of one side of my welt, I just like to flip this entire piece up. Now stitching along the entire bottom of the welt, pretty much stitching in the ditch. So getting as close to this piece of fabric as you can without stitching it. And at this point, it would be wise to just double check and kind of flip over and make sure your welt is still looking good. Or you could have just put a few pins in place before you started sewing. Now, once you make it to the other side of your welt, just gonna lift up, pivot, and then also lift this fabric to the side, exposing your other pin. And now just finishing off by stitching the other side of your welt. Boom! Now your welt is stitched in place, and literally all we did is just stitch along this line, but under the main panel that we're sewing the pocket to. Then bring it back to your ironing board, give it a nice press, examine the beautiful welt you just made. Now you can see if you flip your piece over and then fold the pocket bag up on itself, all we have to do now is close up each side and the top, and you have a beautiful functioning welt pocket. So just flip your entire piece over, exposing the pocket bag. Then you're gonna flip up the pocket bag onto itself, lining up the top and the sides. And then you can give everything a nice press. This is roughly how you should be looking now. So the pocket bag is folded up onto itself. And now all you have to do is stitch either side and the top and you are done. So feel free to just start on one of the sides and stitch around the remaining open edges. And we're just stitching the pocket bag. So flip over and then just stitching the pocket bag closed on either side and the top. And if you start on one of the sides, you can go in one motion all the way around. Or what I'm going to do is actually a French seam. So I'm gonna take the wrong sides of my pocket bag and sew the sides together first at a 1/4 inch, and then I'll flip through, sew at a 1/4 inch again, and then that will leave me with a completely clean finish. So like I said, I'm sewing the wrong sides together first and making sure to just get the pocket bag. And then once I do one of these sides, just flipping through. And then once flipped through, I'll re-stitch this seam again, leaving me a super clean finish. And then I'll do the same thing to the other side. And unfortunately, you can't do that to the top seam. Mine goes into the seam of the yoke, or you could bias tape or do whatever finish you'd like if you're gonna do the French seam on the sides. This is how I'm looking now and how you should roughly be looking. So both of the side seams closed up and that top seam closed up. Now for the final step, I'm just going to be stitching down this top flap by folding over just this little portion here and then stitching very close to that seam on this top edge. So again, just folding over this little top edge to reveal the top of the pocket bag and stitching right along this seam. I would recommend giving it one final press and your welt pocket is complete. So that final step just secured this top edge in, and now you can give your pocket a whirl. Now we are going to be moving on to the double welt pocket. I'm going to be going a little bit faster because the construction is very similar to the single welt pocket. So for the pattern piece on the double welt pocket, it is practically the same as the single welt pocket. I'm going to be doing a slightly more narrow and less deep of a pocket. You could use practically the same pattern piece, but for our double welt pocket, we need space above
the rectangular cutout to form the top welt. So the length can be the same for your double welt pocket piece, but you're gonna wanna have enough space above the rectangular cutout to make your welt and then also have space to sew it up at the top. So you could literally use the same exact piece and just draw the rectangular cutout right below it. So the entire length of the pattern piece is going to be double the length of what you want your pocket to be, plus 2 of the lengths of the welt, but one of the lengths of the welt is going to be above the rectangular cutout, and then there is space still to close it up. Because for the double welt pocket, we're going to be forming the welt a very similar way, but this time we're going to go halfway through the rectangular cutout on the bottom and then halfway through on the top. So just have one length of space above the rectangular cutout of the welt plus space to close it up. And if you want to just steal my exact piece, here it is with all of the measurements. And I did decide to cut out the rectangular cutout just to make it a little easier to trace. Once you have your pattern piece in paper, cut it out in fabric, and then you can mark where your welts are gonna be. Once your piece is marked, you're going to want to put it onto the piece where you want the pocket. And if you're going to have the top edge of your welt pocket going into the seam, just place the top edge of your pocket piece a welt's length above the seam that it's going to go into. So the length of mine is just 1 inch, so I'm just putting it 1 inch above the seam. Place pins if you would like to, and bring it over to your sewing machine. And same as the single welt, we're just going to stitch the perimeter of this rectangle starting in the middle. Now we're going to cut it the same way as the single welt, cutting pretty much right to that corner, but not cutting your stitch. Once cut out, bring it to your ironing board. Now we're going to iron it the same way we did the single welt. So flipping the pocket bag all the way up, giving it a press, then flipping that top edge down, giving it a press nice and flat, and then both of the sides. Now we can flip our entire piece through the cutout just like the single welt, forming our clean cutout. Make sure the seams are fully pulled out and press everything nicely into place. And remember, it's better to have the outside fabric peeking in than it is to have the inside fabric peeking out. Now I'm going to top stitch around the edge of the cutout. This is optional, but I do think it makes the construction a bit more durable. Now we can bring it back to our ironing board, and this is where it gets a little different. So you want to be looking at the underside or the pocket bag of your piece. And I'm going to start by forming the top welt. So I'm going to fold this all the way down and press nice and flat. And then I'm going to fold it back, but leave a fold that covers half of my rectangular cutout. I also went ahead and just marked the halfway point to get it a little more exact, but that's up to you. So we folded over, pressed. Now we're going to fold back, but have a fold covering half of the rectangular opening, and then I will press that flat. Now you can see half of the rectangle is covered up, and we're going to do the same thing now to the other half. So folding up my pocket bag, pressing this nice and flat, and then bringing it back, but leaving a fold enough to cover the other half of the rectangular cutout. So you can just line it up to the other fold nicely and give it a press. Boom. So now you can see we have formed our double welt. And I would recommend flipping it over and just making sure you're happy with how the double welt is looking. I might make a small adjustment just to make it a little bit more even. Once you're happy with how your welts are looking, you're just going to flip up either side and then place a pin to hold the welts in place. Now bring it to your sewing machine. And for the double welt, I'm just going to be stitching the sides to hold the welts in place. So flip up to expose your pin. And then we're going to be stitching right pretty much in this ditch here to lock those welts in place. And make sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end just to lock everything in place. I forgot to mention this while I was filming the video, But if you think your fabric has potential for sagging in the welt, when you stitch down the welts on the side, I would also go along this bottom edge, so stitching in the ditch just to lock that in. Once you lock your welts into place, I would recommend a nice press, and you can now examine the beautiful double welt you just made. All the hard work is now done. You can just flip to the back side now and see how your pocket bag is just going to flip up, and you'll stitch up both of the sides and the top. So just flip that pocket bag up, give it a nice press in place. It is up to you how you want to finish the remaining opening edges. If you're going to line whatever you're doing the welt pockets on, you can just leave them raw, you can serge them, zigzag them, or what I'm going to do again is a French seam. So I'm just going to put the wrong sides together on either side, sew at a 1/4 inch, and then flip to the other side and sew at a 1/4 inch again. And if you are going to go the French seam route, I'm pretty positive you have to either have the top edge going into the seam or finish it other some type of way, but I'd be happy if I was wrong. I just haven't been able to wrap my mind around that construction. And when you sew up your pocket bag, we're just doing the pocket bag. So depending on how you're doing it, just the pocket bag, not stitching the actual panel. If you start on one side, you can go in one foul swoop all the way around. And same for the French seam. I'm making sure to just get the pocket bag when I'm sewing the wrong sides together and the right sides together. And my little trick for sewing French seams is I'll stitch just below a 1/4 inch. And then after I flip through, I'll stitch just above a 1/4 inch to encase that seam without having to trim it off. Boom! This is how my welt pocket is looking after all said and done. Super clean finish. This top edge is going into the seam. And yeah, the pockets I sewed in this video are actually for a sample for my newest pattern, the Sandler shorts, coming soon. It's like my version of an elevated baggy basketball shorts. Also, let me know what you thought about the audio in this video. I got a new little microphone, hoping to make the sound a little bit more consistent. Make sure to let me know if you have any questions down below. Like and subscribe if you'd like to. Let me know what type of videos you would like to see next. My next video will probably be for the Sandler shorts because it's summer and it's what I want to wear, so I want to get it out while it's still hot. I fall asleep at night thinking about all the different ways you could copy pants, but I think I've come up with the 3 best ways, so I'll be showing that. Pants with pleats, darts, whatever, how to do it to a T. I love you. Peace and love.